Becky, and today we're going to be diving into Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. If you've ever been interested in like fairy folk tales and kind of cozy, low fantasy books, Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries is that book for you. It is about our main character. It's set in a kind of fictional Scandinavian country, very cold, bleak, icy weather, where a Cambridge professor of folklore and fairy tales, Emily Wilde, goes on a expedition to find out more about the fae that live up there that haven't been kind of explored yet, haven't been distinctly researched. And her goal is to create an encyclopedia of all fae in this world. But she's not a very people person. She's very academic and gifted, but people she doesn't quite get, and this is why she focuses on her profession more than anything else. So yeah, when Emily arrives in the small town she's going to be staying in, she doesn't really want to befriend the kind of gruff townsfolk that are there. That obviously everyone knows each other in this small town, as small town people do, and she doesn't quite fit in. She doesn't become friends with them easily. And then her colleague Wendell also comes to join her at a later date, but he's quite lazy. He doesn't really want to help, although he's really good with people. So he starts making friends with the townsfolk super easy, which just annoys Emily because they don't seem to want to help her, even though she's not helping herself. They also have Shadow the dog, which is the perfect addition to any book, and we just love him for being there all the time. So whilst they're trying to find the hidden ones, or the kind of fae that they've not discovered yet, there's kind of a two-pronged approach. The story is very much written as like an academic journal, writing down what's happening each day, but as it gets more and more into the story, we see more of a self-discovery for Emily. As she learns more about the fairy folk and the townsfolk and Wendell and everything that's going on around, she starts to open up a bit more about how she feels and how she is discovering things as well. And so we see a lot of growth in that way. But Wendell Bambleby is also, he's another professor, so they have very similar interests, and is probably the only other professor that she has a colleague relationship with properly. Even though she doesn't really seem to like him that much, they seem to get on really well, and this kind of self-obsession that he has with himself is kind of a cover for the many layers that are uncovered throughout the book. And we see Emily slowly unfold these layers at the same time, and it just has a really good juxtaposition of someone who is really good with people and someone who's really not good at people. And actually the person that's really good with people has so much depth to them that you initially don't realise, because you think they are quite self-obsessed and vapid. And then we get to the world building. So we are doing an Encyclopaedia of Faeries, so we know there's fae all over this world. However, it's also set up very similar to our current world, so it's quite low fantasy as well. The world building there is amazing. We are given to a fictional Scandinavian country. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name, I'm not going to pronounce it correctly. And then it's all very cold and a bit damp and a bit miserable. But then we discover as we go along some beautiful views, and there's a scene in the book where you're just freezing cold when reading it because the world building is so atmospheric that you just feel like you're there with Emily and the company. And then the plot itself is very slow. It is very academic journal-y. The writing style is Emily's writing in her academic journal, and therefore she's writing what she's thinking, what she's discovering, what she's thinking about looking into next. And that leads you down a very Emily-centric story, but we see a lot more from her side of things, how things open up, and she discovers more about the other people around her as well, which I really enjoyed. I would say the entire concept, but specifically the encyclopedia, lent me to be thinking it's going to be very much like Spiderwick Chronicles, and I found that it was. Instead of from the kids' point of view in the Spiderwick Chronicles, you're the author Spiderwick and you are discovering these fae. Some are really nice, some are not so, and you kind of discover all of these for yourself. And I just really loved that nostalgic feel of going back to a story that was written that way, and it felt like we were uncovering these things together and kind of exploring the world. Similar to Spiderwick Chronicles as well, because it's an encyclopedia of fairies, we get to meet so many different types. So for example, we see like brownies and changelings, which are quite dangerous, and we see this kind of dark side of the fae that some books kind of overlook, but I love it when they do include that kind of folklore dangerous feel. But despite this dark feel, the humour and wittiness from our characters really do come through. The prose is really quite humorous at times, and I would say it's quite a light-hearted and cozy book, even though it has those darker themes of the fae being like changelings and stealing kids. But actually the characters' banter between Emily and Wendell is quite funny, and you really get into the heads of these people and like really enjoy it when funny things happen. I also think, I don't think it's ever said in the book, but I think Emily Wilde is actually quite autistic coded. She has her special interests, there's the issues with social interaction and just generally being very focused on one thing, which is the fae. And I think this relatability for characters may really help you feel more for Emily than other characters might do. But you see a wild range of characters, and how they treat Emily is not nasty in any way, which I really appreciated. Overall, Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries is like the perfect cozy fantasy. I read it in only 2 or 3 days. I just wanted to read more and find out what was going to happen to our character, and I really enjoyed as you go further and further, it moves from kind of meticulous academic notes to a full kind of story, folklore orientated, and I just loved the writing style. I loved the characters, and the plot was really fun. So yeah, that's my quick thoughts on Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. How many times have I said that in the video? I would really recommend it to anyone who wants to read a quick fantasy book. It's not too big either. Look at that book. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again for the next one.